Hi, and welcome to Fostering Conversations, produced by CASA of Southwest Missouri. This is a podcast where we share the real stories of real children navigating the foster care system. I'm Shelby Blakely, and I'm our training coordinator.
I'm Hannah Wilford, and I'm one of the Greene County Advocate Supervisors.
I'm so glad that we're taking the time to listen to a story from a child navigating the foster care system. So, Hannah's going to share that with us, and we're so excited to learn. All right, Hannah, why don't you take us away with the story?
Okay, I would love to. So, a lot of people at the hospital knew this child by name before they ever knew their story. Security knew them because sometimes they came in screaming, fists clenched, rage pouring out of them faster than anyone could contain. Nurses knew them because they would rip IVs from their arms and refuse help. Therapists knew them because they would sit in complete silence for hours and then suddenly throw a chair hard enough to crack drywall. The reports described them as aggressive towards adults, property destruction, chronic suicidal ideation, placement instability, and more. By 15, this child had been hospitalized more than 20 times. Residential treatment centers came and went like seasons.
Ooh, wait, so sorry to interrupt,
No.
but I'm just curious, can you tell me a little more about what a residential treatment center can look like?
Yeah, so a residential treatment center itself is a 24-hour therapeutic care psychiatric treatment and educational services to children or adolescents with emotional or behavioral challenges. And those can include like trauma informed care and specialized treatments, medication management, things like that. In Springfield, we have quite a few. The hospital Cox North has one. That's more of a short-term residential kind of stabilization before they can move them to a more long-term facility. Long-term facilities look like Perimeter, Lakeland. A couple out of Springfield is Good Samaritan's Boys Ranch, Faith Foundations in Fredericktown. And those are really just programs that help kiddos stabilize, whether it's emotions, whether it's behaviors, or like I said, medications. They see really great results from kiddos being in those facilities.
Okay, so it's like for those kiddos who are navigating foster care but need a lot more support and structure.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So some residential treatments lasted a few months, others lasted a few days. After being admitted to the same facility so many times, eventually they gave up on help too. Every discharge summary sounded similar. Services are no longer beneficial. Needs exceed program capacity. Unable to maintain safety. Healthcare providers stopped saying their name with empathy after a while. They said it with exhaustion instead. This child heard every single word, every negative statement, every adult that lost hope, and every ounce of annoyance when spoken of. What no one seemed to understand was that this child spent most of their life believing that people always left. Their father hadn't spoken to them in years. Their mother, while she loved them dearly, grew tired and signed over her rights. Foster homes disrupted, staff quit, therapists transferred, and teachers changed schools.
Can we talk a little bit about parents signing over their rights? I know that most goals are reunification for the
Mhm.
family, but this is obviously a reality as well. We've also talked in previous episodes about termination of parental
Mhm.
rights, but this feels a little bit different.
Yeah. So there are differences between voluntary and involuntary termination of parental rights. I was doing some research, and the state of Missouri doesn't really have statistics on this because it really is hard to differentiate between the involuntary, which is parents losing their rights due to abuse and neglect, or voluntary, which is signing their rights over themselves. Um, but 22% of the children are adopted. So that could look like the parents did sign their rights over because they knew that they couldn't provide, um, or they lost their rights. And then 9% of our youth age out at 21. So it's really hard to nail down exactly what that looks like, but those are the statistics that I do have.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Um, every person who promised to stay eventually proved them right. So the child learned to leave first. If they destroyed a room badly enough, they'd remove them. If they screamed loudly enough, they'd restrain them. And if they hurt themselves enough, they'd send them away. At least then they controlled when people gave up. But there was one person who kept showing up, their CASA. At first, the youth wanted nothing to do with them. The first time the CASA visited the residential treatment center, they refused to come out of their room. So their CASA sat and waited anyway. Eventually, the youth walked past the doorway just to see if they had left. They hadn't. The next week, they came back, and the week after that. Sometimes the youth would become angry, sad, or irritable, but the CASA never matched their emotions. They asked the hard questions nobody bothered asking anymore. Questions like, what scares you most about going home? And what do you think people misunderstand about you? At first, these questions were answered with shrugs, then one-word responses, then eventually real answers came out. One afternoon, after a hospitalization for self-harm, the CASA arrived carrying a gas station drink and a pack of candy. The youth looked exhausted, bandages wrapped around their forearms, and the youth stated, "You didn't have to come."
Oh, how heartbreaking.
I know.
Just this well-intentioned person there to support them, and they can't even accept that.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of times our older youth truly feel disposable because they have been given up by so many people. And I think that's one of the most amazing things about our CASAs is that they teach them that they're not, that they're worth so much more than just their case file.
Yeah.
Yeah.
More than just the candy and the
Yes.
soda too,
Yeah.
right?
But the CASA stated, I know. An answer that will sit with a child longer than a therapy session will. CASAs aren't there because they're paid to monitor a child. They aren't there because the policy requires it. CASAs are there because they choose to be. Over the years, CASA became the adult that was trusted, not because they had a magic fix, but because they celebrated things other people overlooked. They celebrated 30 days without self-harm, a successful family visit, walking away from an argument instead of throwing something. That is the importance of a CASA. Not someone who magically erases trauma or who always has the perfect answer, but someone who stays. Someone who shows up after hospital discharges, after placement disruptions, after the angry outbursts and impossible days. Someone who believes a child is more than the worst thing they've done. Children in care don't need perfection, they need someone who will stay. Be the person who shows up, be the voice that advocates, and be the consistency that changes a life. Become a CASA today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, of course.
So this kiddo obviously had a lot of support from their CASA when they needed it really badly too.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, and we've kind of touched a little bit on it, but what does the typical story look like for a youth that might be in a similar situation but doesn't have that CASA on their in their corner?
Yeah. So I am our early childhood specialist. We have two older youth specialists here. And so they know more about what an older youth's path through the foster care system looks like. But from the few that I have, it's amazing to see an older youth and a volunteer's relationship blossom because the older youth can voice what they need, whether that's going apartment hunting through our apartment programs, learning how to do a budget, learning how to do their FAFSA for college. And they're truly there on good and bad days. And so while it looks different for every older youth, most of the time it's learning how to be an adult and just taking the time to walk them through all of these things.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and we all know how the public school system doesn't tell us what a credit score is,
Nope.
but I sure can balance a checkbook.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that there are some adults stepping up and into this space for these kiddos because they're at more of a disadvantage for that support, and so they need a lot of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Becoming an adult is terrifying, and to do it with no support is even scarier. So,
Yeah, no safety net.
nope.
Yeah, they are brave for that for sure. Okay, well, thank you so much for sharing. We are going to get into our next section, which is pretty fun. We like to tell a joke on the podcast because Judge loves when kids are in the courtroom and
Yes.
loves for them to share a joke. So we're going to take a second and listen to a joke from a kiddo.
What's a pirate's favorite subject in school? Art.
Oh my gosh.
That's so cute.
I love that.
Perfect. Well, thanks for learning with us today. We are another episode down.
Another child's future up.
Bye.